podcast.
Wow.
We had a good intro.
It's so intense.
It is very intense.
In post, can you change that to like a black metal, like?
I think I can definitely do that. I think I'll pull it that way. I'll take requests from you. What's up, people? Welcome to Creative Theater Podcast, a show that brings you conversations with visual artists about how they got to where they got, what their day-to-day is like, what their struggles are, their goals, thoughts about the art world, and a lot more. That voice you heard, this man is a visual artist now living in Vancouver, BC, fan of darkness. According to his Instagram, he is a fan of lightning strikes and goats. And,
Indeed.
I think that's great. Teaching at Emily Carr University, illustration department, repped by Russo Lee Gallery.
Russo Lee. Yeah.
Russo Lee.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Amory Abbot.
Hello.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Thank
Nice
you.
to be here.
I'm glad you made it. It's raining outside, so that means we're not going to be sweating in here because in the summer it got pretty hot. We're here live from Save on Radio. So yeah, was that a pretty good intro? Did I get it?
Yeah. I think you covered all the basics: goats, lightning strikes, darkness. I teach. I'm an artist. Yeah.
Good. Okay, good. Also, you're going to be one of the artists on the list on Art Breakers, which is coming up September 22, 23, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right around the corner. And I like that for people who are not familiar with your work, it's at Amory Abbot, ABBOTT. If you want to look up his work, I think the way you complement the group is, I think, I guess the word is complimenting it, because as an illustration market, I think your personal work rides a fine line between fine art and illustration.
Yeah. I was a little worried, like, that my style of art was going to be a little, like, not illustration-y enough. Like I was going to be like the odd kid out, but I prefer that you say it complimenting.
I think so, and it's I think it's like going to a music show where hopefully there's a nice variety of music, so you don't get bored, because if the first and the second and the third bands sound exactly the same, by the end you just
Okay, I'm gonna count on that.
By the end you're getting too much cake, right? That's what we were talking about before this.
That's right.
So lots to talk about, because it would be great to get into your teaching and then personal work, then where you come from, and then Art Breakers and Goats and Metal. So lots to, but I was looking in your website, and you got Art Breakers coming up in September. You got a one-year exhibition in November this year, and then you got a solo coming up in February 2019. So you just like to keep yourself busy, huh?
Well, yeah, it's fits and starts.
And so how do you manage that? Or do you have a schedule, a process? What has been working for you to get these things in a row, line them up, and then get it done?
I don't think I would have originally planned on having all these things sort of happen in such a short sequence, but I'll take what I can get. And it's been a kind of like the last year moving up to Vancouver and transitioning to teaching full-time has been that's been an experience that's kind of required most of my energy and most of my attention, and I kind of purposefully put off any kind of big efforts towards gallery shows or exhibitions, just so I can really kind of get here.
Oh, wow, so it's only been just over a year ago, you're saying?
Yeah, I moved up here in July last year.
Mm-hmm. And then, because I was noticing a lot of your work, or some of the shows you've had, were in Portland. Is that where you were at before that?
Yeah. I was in Portland for 3 years before that. I moved out there for grad school from Indianapolis, Indiana.
Oh, you're traveling all across, huh? And now you're... How's Vancouver been for you so far?
It's been really good.
Yeah?
It's been really good. I've never considered myself a city person, but moving up here and was a great learning experience, and I don't mind it so much now.
What did you mind, though?
There's just something about being in a big city. I've been to bigger cities like Chicago, New York, San Francisco, and they're just so overwhelmingly large and overpopulated and hard to navigate. I think moving to Portland was a nice transition from the small town I grew up in to a city like Vancouver. Not that Vancouver's a giant city.
Exactly, yeah. That's what I was going to say. Similar to Portland, it's somewhere in between, right?
It feels like a big city. It acts like a big city.
Try to pretend like it's one, but it's not.
So you can still walk across the whole thing in 45 minutes.
How having traveled or lived in different places, how do you find the art scenes comparing to one another?
I haven't experienced much of the art scene in Vancouver yet. I've just had my head down so much at Emily Carr. But there was a pretty thriving art scene in Indianapolis when I left, and maybe an adolescent art scene there. But moving to Portland was certainly this big exposure to much more current, up-to-date, contemporary art world, and the art scene in Portland is just exploding.
Why do you think? I went there a couple of months ago, and it noticeably so. There are a lot of galleries, just a lot of art everywhere. They embrace it really well.
Yeah, I mean, Portland's gone through this massive gentrification over the last 5 years, and
is that what it is? That way?
And art is the harbinger of that. So
yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there's plenty of seasoned galleries there now that, and I don't know. I mean, Portland has always sort of been like the weird, artsy kid of the Pacific Northwest family of cities.
That's what I hear. A lot of these things are just noticing or people say, and then and like I said, being there and seeing their own mural fest happening as well, and so from street to the galleries. How did the relationship come with the Russo Lee Gallery? How did you establish that? Was it once you moved there, or before it?
No, I moved there in 2014 and to go to grad school at Pacific Northwest College of Art. And during that program, I had the opportunity to meet a few different gallery directors and gallerists that were running different galleries around town and in smaller places like coffee shops. And so I wound up getting this show at Stumptown Coffee Roasters downtown. Yeah. This little coffee shop in an old historic building, and put up a series of drawings there, and it was like the first time I'd shown any work in the Pacific Northwest outside of school critiques. And so I made a bunch of postcards and hand wrote messages to every gallery director I could find, any recommendations from anybody I knew, and mailed them all cards.
That's smart.
And Martha Lee showed up, saw the show.
Wow. And that's a really good idea.
Yeah, and invited me to be in a group show, and then from the group show it was really successful, and we talked for probably a year or so after that, and about a solo show there, and I kind of weighed some offers for representation from a couple people, and Russo was the clear choice.
So now you're there. When you say you had some other offers for presentation, are those what do they look like? Are they contracts? Are they?
Yeah, it's kind of a I mean, there is a contract involved. I mean, being represented by a gallery is sort of like, it's a little more old school now, because a lot of people are kind of doing their own thing. But I mean, it's really similar to the record industry. Like, being represented by a gallery is like signing to a record label, and there's plenty of people out there having great success publishing their own music on SoundCloud and, and selling their own music, and plenty of artists out there who can just sell their own work off their websites, prints, originals, do conventions and fairs and things like Art Breakers, and make a living off that, hopefully. But I wanted something that was a little more, I mean, I wanted a white wall.
Yeah. And does it mean you have to be exclusive with them as far as showing work?
Yeah, within a certain geographical region.
Okay, yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah, but they also have a team of half a dozen people working there selling my work. So
that's
I
that's
what
I was going to say.
Work, and that's
that's
for sure. Worth the worth the commission.
And especially when you find people who get your work, it seems to be the key is that, or if looking from the outside, is that to make the relationship work, you have to be in with someone who gets it and likes it enough to be really passionate about, like you're saying, selling it for you.
Yeah, and oftentimes they can explain my work better than I can explain it myself.
That's how you know you got the right people.
I get so caught up in specific details that don't really matter to most people, and then I hear them talk about their work, and it's like, oh wow, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant with that. Yeah. Sweet. And then when you decided to go to Portland for postgrad.
For graduate school.
Oh, sorry, graduate school.
Well, yeah, whatever they call it here.
I don't
postgrad.
really know. But how did that choice come to be?
There was the program was an interdisciplinary program, or maybe a multidisciplinary group of students. So all my classmates it it wasn't an illustration program like the undergrad that I had. My classmates were sculptors and photographers and video installation artists and performance artists and oil painters and a few drawers as well. So really the vocabulary that comes to a critique from a group of people like that is really expansive, and you learn a lot more than what small little corner of the art world you're working in. You learn to talk about your work in a lot of different ways and perceive the work in different ways that you may not have expected it when you were thinking about your own work and making your own work, that if somebody offers a different interpretation of what you're making, that can really change how you move forward with the work, where you see it landing too. Like I don't think I went into grad school expecting that I would become a gallery artist instead of like an illustrator. But it happened.
Did it change your mind?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
You seem to, even before we spoke, you seem to put a lot of emphasis on this idea of that feedback and the critique from various artists. It was that impactful, I guess. It's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's part of why I love being a teacher. And at an art school is that it's hard, even within a small group of your peers who are maybe working in the same industry or working in the same style or with the same ideas in mind or same research, you end up recycling a lot of ideas and a lot of vocabulary and a lot of interpretation, and getting into some bigger conversations with a bigger group of people always leads to a better understanding of your own work, at least, and an understanding of the climate of the art world too. Is like if you keep doing the same thing on your own for 10 years and then you step back into the art scene or go to a gallery show, you may not know what you're looking at.
Yeah.
You may not be up on like what people are making work about, and being up on that is part of being. It's like it's the responsibility of a practicing artist, I think.
So it is it's interesting just because I've spoken about this subject of like, is it okay to get away for years or put yourself somewhere and then just keep making work?
Sure.
But you're saying it's not as you don't benefit as much from being outside of the art world rather than being aware of what's happening and creating in the context of what's happening.
If you're interested in sharing your ideas with others and furthering your ideas with others as like a art community in a certain sort of way, I think it's important that people are involved with what they're into. They're involved with the world around them. It's hard to create it's hard to create many new ideas in a bubble.
Yeah. And what about being affected too much by the visuals of by the visuals that the other artists are creating?
Sure.
Yeah. What about that idea?
There's always a balance between, well, at least for me, it's like I like walking with one foot in the sort of contemporary highbrow art world, but I always like to keep a foot in like outside of it, where I can, like, if I look at some work and I'm like, oh my God, this is so ridiculous, like I can step away and just like, I don't have to know what that's, I don't need to figure out what that's about. I don't need somebody to explain it to me, but
that's why it kind of caught me off guard when they said that, you have to be there to understand what they're making. And to me, sometimes one of the issues I have was like some piece of art is that when you have to read something to get it, and I'm like, well, what, did you do a good job? And then that's a personal judgment. I don't know if I'm right in that case, because sure, a really well written thesis on something that explains and talks about an idea, it's very powerful. It's just coming from a animation, maybe not really illustration, but animation background. The way to go is that if it needs explanation, you failed. And so, well,
that's a kind of contrasting idea. It's something like how illustration shares space with conceptual art, where illustration oftentimes is so aimed at delivering an idea or communicating something in a very clear way that doesn't need an explanation, right? Like you look at the image and you see it and you get it. It may take a moment, or you may have to investigate it for a while, but like the idea is made clear.
At least hopefully you get some of it. I mean,
Right.
you get a start, and then if you read, it completes it maybe, right?
Exactly. It is supplemented to some degree by text or story or advertising or whatever the outcome is. But I think it's a lot. It's a lot to ask most of the public to appreciate work that is intentionally confusing or intentionally secretive or or just plain hard to understand, you know.
Whether
if you need a
it was
gallery,
designed so.
if you need the gallery director to come over and explain to you like what emotional turmoil the artist was going through when they created this, series of undergarments tied in knots on the floor. Or
I was waiting for example.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
It's a lot of people have a hard time taking that seriously, and that's I don't like to shut out work like that so easily, mostly because of my education in graduate school, and also understanding that like art isn't one thing. Art is not always easy to understand, and that there's value in whatever kind of creative outlets people have, but like you're not going to reach as wide of an audience with work like that, and that's
and
okay.
Yeah, and somehow every once in a while, it does reach an audience because of how if not out of the box, but how strange it is, right? Sometimes these things do become part of pop culture for how odd they are.
Yeah,
they become
there's a kind of like shock value or
totally,
the oddness. There's like there's the spectacle of certain kinds of work is like the payoff when you look at it.
Yeah.
That seems a little cheap.
Yeah.
In a way, sometimes to work that's like really thought out or work that's really technically mastered work.
Yeah, I think it's I like what you're saying, because being especially an educator, I think it's important to, like you said, not shut out any kinds of art, because not only there's no one way to do it, but hopefully you can understand and
and contemporary art, I think in a lot of ways contemporary art is trying to find threads that cross over that boundary.
A lot of it can be alienating, though. I mean, if you ever wandered through Vancouver Art Gallery, it's and you can see people's reactions. Sometimes it's actually more fun to just stand and watch people interact with pieces. You know, they would walk in a room and be like, "What am I supposed to do here?"
Right.
And then, so once again, unless there was a goal from the artist, is to just confuse people completely.
Right.
Yeah. And I know this is another big long discussion, and I have an opinion. I don't know if it's a completely educated one. I'm trying to read more about contemporary art specifically. And, you look at history and how it developed. I think the way modern art developed kind of makes sense. But, I mean, when you look at a piece on its own, quite often it's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
When you, I guess that we just dove off there. When you introduce yourself to people, do you say you're an illustrator or a painter? Or what do you say? Artist?
It's kind of difficult because technically I'm a drawer.
Drawer, okay. Yeah, love it.
Most of, I mean, myself included, a lot of people when referring to my work say paintings, because they look like paintings, and I just, sometimes it's easier to just call them paintings, but they're technically charcoal drawings. Yeah, they are drawings on paper. I use my hands, I use a towel, I use some gum erasers and kneaded erasers. I don't use any brushes or binding agents.
You don't soften with brush? What do you use? No?
No, I use a shop towel.
Nice.
To soften things. So it is really very much a traditional drawing practice, charcoal on paper.
If you want to see like powerful mood, people should look at your paintings. I think so. Once again, it's AmoryAbbot.com. So or that on Instagram as well. I was really impressed, and actually I was even more impressed when I saw the scale of the work, because you got this really nice pulls, like where you whatever the tools you use to erase, and then you pull these. They're not geometric shapes that are kind of fading, almost as if like charcoal is being pulled. But I was wondering what kind of tools you use, because having worked with Conte, I get you can use a kneaded eraser, but when it's it's 6 inches wide of a pull, Is that, you were saying that's rags as well, or what do you?
No,
No?
well, I mean the soft washes down
Yeah.
of the like gray gradients are done with a towel.
Mhm.
But all the like the white geometric areas are carved out really just with like a gum eraser, like one of those.
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah, okay, yeah.
tan colored gum erasers, and I just like I use a blade to like square off the ends nice and sharp, and
Mhm.
just like it's like carving it out.
Yeah, you picked quite a messy medium. How did you
Oh, yeah,
arrive at
it's so messy.
charcoal?
I fought with charcoal. I've been fighting with charcoal since my undergrad, and I keep going back to it. And I think one of the, yeah, I just started doing these like render drawings that were sort of maybe whimsical, sort of dark. I mean, charcoal, it's easy to make dark drawings with
Yeah.
charcoal. I liked drawing with graphite, but graphite felt like it was too shiny. It wasn't. Couldn't get it dark enough.
can't get the deep
You
black.
can't get
Yeah,
really
yeah.
dark, even
Yeah.
with like an ebony pencil. So the next, I mean, it was just suggested to me like, why don't you try it in charcoal pencil?
Yeah.
And it was like, oh, okay, well this gets darker. And then you push that contrast range quite a bit, actually,
Mhm.
switching to charcoal. And I just like kept working with it, and then I just kept facing this issue of like nobody takes drawings seriously as a like finalized art form. Like
Yeah.
drawing oftentimes has this stigma of being like the medium you use on your way to creating a
Yeah,
painting.
like a step. Rather
Yeah,
than final.
it's the sketch phase, right? And so I would try watercolor for a while, go back to charcoal. I try working in oil paint or acrylic, like even monochromatically. Like I can do these paintings in black, and they'll look the same, but it still didn't. I mean, but it wasn't looking how I wanted it to
doesn't-
look.
yeah.
And so I keep going back, and then I started researching artists who like actually work in charcoal. So take like Sean Tan, book illustrator, does tons of work in charcoal, beautiful work. His book The Arrival is like all charcoal. One of my graduate mentors and a really prolific artist now in Portland is Samantha Wall. She does these large charcoal drawings, now switched to ink some too. But then like looking back at contemporary artists, Robert Longo does these massive charcoal paintings, like the size of a wall.
Wow.
Of waves or sharks, or like, I mean, pretty highly rendered images of forests and things like that. And it's like, well, okay, people do take this
It is
seriously.
possible, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, and if I want to work in that, like, why not?
Yeah. How long did it take for you to realize that, kind of step out of that place where kind of caring about what people thought what a finished thing should be, and then being like, oh no, it's actually possible?
A lot of that change happened in grad school,
Yeah?
honestly. Yeah, I mean, the two big realizations I had in or maybe there's like three big realizations I got in my graduate experience. The first was that like I don't have to draw people or figures or living things. Like I can just draw mountains
Do you feel like
and
you have
trees.
to?
I felt like I did. I felt like it was like a cop out if I wasn't addressing the figure in my work. But landscapes really mattered to me. The other thing I kind of had to come to terms with was that like drawing is a legitimate professional medium, and I can like really push that. I can like really dig into what it means to draw and my process of drawing, and like really turn that into something spectacular. And then the last thing that I really had to come to terms with, it like I kind of make work that's inspired by fantasy, and it's moody and dark, and it's kind of like the themes are kind of adolescent to a certain degree. Like the idea of making professional work that is like fantasy was really intimidating. Like people aren't going to take this seriously. They're going to look at this like it's like they're going to think I'm trying to sneak a comic book into like a book convention, right? Or like, and like my first show at Russo Lee, most of the drawings, like at least 2/3 of the drawings, were from a series I did of landscapes that were based on locations in Middle Earth, J.R.R. Tolkien's Middle Earth. And so like I felt like I was I felt like I was tricking them. You're putting this work on the wall, like, you don't know, but this is all fantasy work.
You're breaking the fine art world.
I am. I felt like I was like pulling one over on them.
Good. You have to.
It felt, yeah, I mean, it was fun.
The more the better. But
It was fun.
it's interesting that you describe it so. When I on your website, I think you wrote something. Let me see if I got it. Let's see, because you talked about what you're inspired by. Yeah, it's Gothic romanticism, black metal, and dark ecology and fantasy. I think is what you talked about, poetry and music. But when I look at your pieces, they look like they fit in a gallery because the fantasy element, it's got maybe a mature take on it.
It's a little understated, yeah.
Because
it's implied and not obvious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And even if it is obvious, I think there's a serious way to do fantasy where you can consider it to be like, it's so close that it could be real, or it's got so much emotion that it feels like it's real. You forget the fact that it could be fantasy. You know what I mean? Like so, I feel like that's what you're doing. It doesn't feel like obviously, it doesn't feel like Lord of the Rings where you can't take it seriously. It feels like
right.
You can.
It's not. Yeah, it's like you believe it to an extent. Like the way it's depicted, you believe it to an extent where you're like, there could be an ogre behind that tree, but I'm not drawing an ogre behind a tree, right? It's like there aren't dragons flying through the air in my paintings, but there are like implied dragons, right?
Yeah. I like that you said that you're fighting charcoal all the time, because that my relationship with it felt like it feels like a fight.
Oh, it's so messy.
And it's so hands-on. Yeah.
The question I get probably the most about my work is like, how do you keep the white spaces so white? And it's like, well, I'm really, really careful.
You have to be. That one of the paintings that you sent, I'll make sure to post it on Instagram, with a tree in the center. Yeah, like the clean whites and a transition into grays. That's really impressive. How I'll make sure to post it. But how large is that one? Do you remember?
Most of the tree pieces, the Caldera series, are all like right around maybe 2 feet by 3 feet, 22 by 30. I just use a standard like half-size sheet of paper.
And then, actually, I want to get into size. Well, when you mentioned to me that you work, that's kind of your general standard size in the studio, and then for gallery work you go larger, right? Is there a reason why?
It's for, it's, I would say the gallery, the work that I've shown in shows at my gallery and that I'd like to keep showing are these sort of vast landscapes. Like the tree pieces I tend to consign to the gallery and they get sold, but they don't go up in shows or anything like that. Okay. Those are kind of my main production work, I suppose. Like if I had a bread and butter work that I sold, it would be the drawings like the trees that are a little more close up. But when I'm working with like these bigger landscapes, the vast landscapes with the mountain peaks and the big waterfalls and these big open white watery areas, those I like to work really big because there is a spectacle to the size. There is a sort of immersion that people experience when you're standing in front of a piece that's like 4 feet by 8 feet.
Scale makes a huge difference, especially for something like, because you're tackling an epic scene.
And oftentimes like I worked at a like very zoomed out perspective, like high in the air. So all the little like ridges and mountains and peaks and valleys and the rivers that run through them, like there's a lot of tiny little trees and details and stuff in there, and that like if I go really, really big, I can put more of that in there and kind of hide it in there. With the smaller work, a lot of my studio work is working at this sort of awkward size where it's like too big to be this sort of small moment in a larger landscape, like a small area, but it's not big enough to like really encompass the feeling of a huge place. So that's something I'm working on. So most of the work that I do in my studio is sort of exploratory, as opposed to like this is going to go on a gallery wall. Let's say the big stuff for that.
Do you tackle the pieces with keeping that in mind, that this is going to go to a show and this is not?
For the most part. Yeah. I mean, unless, like, right now I'm in production mode for shows, so I'm working on sketches for my show in February for my solo show, and then I've got this exhibition in November at the Portland airport in the international concourse of, like, a series of drawings I did, or a series of drawings from photographs I took on an art residency I did in May in Ireland. So now I'm, like, working on the finished pieces for the Ireland show. And those are all just like working from photographs. So I know like I am making the finished work for that. I don't need to do sketches ahead of time and just like working from my reference photos. For the big stuff in my other like solo show, that's all a little more like those I'll be doing a lot of sketches for and And a lot of the work I'm doing now is just like the stuff that's not for the shows is just to keep me in practice.
Practice?
Yeah.
It's so valuable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I scrolling through your Instagram, I like the fact seeing your Instagram account I found very useful because you seem to write about the process and what you do, and I really appreciate it. And I think it makes me realize about as I'm consuming your information or something, you know, or as your Instagram, there's a couple artists I follow where you can, you know, don't just look at the artwork, but you can actually get something out of it because of like what's written. I really appreciated the fact that you wrote
nice.
it. It's really cool. But I think
I had like a manifesto about
I guess, but even about your
about
materials,
process, about sketching, and
exactly. Yeah, there was. Let me see. I copied one of the quotes from. I'm trying to remember what the image was, but so you talked about the process of being, you know, blue line drawing in a sketchbook, then scanned, resized, converted to grayscale Photoshop, then projected on the final paper substrate, then traced lightly with graphite, and then you do the. I loved reading that because it sounded like you're someone who not only appreciates the process, but you at this point it seems like you have it nailed down for what you need to get done. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean the this is another process. Well, maybe this is another thing I learned in grad school. I note to listeners, like, you go to grad school.
It sounds like it was really useful. I mean, I'm learning from you from your grad school.
No, it was this process. You know, when I was younger, before grad school, I used to really believe in the like art gods in a way. Like it was this like, okay,
The mystery.
I'm gonna burn some incense and I'm gonna stand in my studio, and I'm gonna stare at this blank piece of paper, and then the spirit is going to come to me, and I'm going to draw the best thing I've ever drawn, and I'm gonna trust that like the inspiration in the moment is gonna lead to like my best work. You know, like I think we all want to believe that as
Hopefully,
artists, that
yeah.
we have this like this like daemon, right, or this like genius that like strikes us, and then we become these like superhuman artists. But really, it's like I kind of half-ass things when I'm not prepared, and so one big change in my process was going from these sort of like quick thumbnail sketches that I would then suddenly move to like a 5-foot by 7-foot piece of paper and do these massive landscapes on. They were like pretty nice, but not great. They were, they were good, but they weren't like, they didn't satisfy everything. And so I changed my process. One of my graduate mentors, Daniela Molnar, was like, why aren't you sketching more? I was like, well, because sketching's boring, right? It's like, I want to just get to the big drawings. And but I really took that to heart, and I started doing these like super detailed drawings. And what I found out is that like when I would do these highly detailed drawings with the blue pencil, which are, only maybe 4 by 6 inches big. I don't work in a big sketchbook, but highly detailed, that I would spend a couple hours, almost as long as I spend on the final drawings, getting these really detailed little sketches down and getting the composition exactly how I want it, getting all the tones, highlights, all this stuff exactly how I want to see it. And so that way, when I go through the process of like what some artists might consider cheating, of like scanning in my sketch, doctoring it up a little in Photoshop, projecting it using like a digital projector on the wall onto the paper, and then tracing the whole thing before I start the finished drawing. Like when I get to the final drawing now, that's traced from this like from a sketch that I'm 100% satisfied with. I know that if I don't do anything different than what I did in the sketch, it's going to be a great piece.
It's going to work, yeah.
But then, so what that does is like relieves the pressure off me to like always be thinking about is the composition right yet? Is my lighting right yet? I know it's going to be right. So then the only thing I have to concern myself with is like having fun while I'm drawing it, and leaving myself open to the possibility of play and making little changes as I go. If the art gods suddenly strike me with an inspiring thought to change something, I can do it if I want. But I don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Plus, it's like it takes a long time to build the panels and stretchers that I mount my paper to, and so like
you stretch your own paper? No, but
my substrate process is I build a wooden frame that has a cleat on the back so it can hang on a wall, and then that wooden frame has a panel of gator board
Okay.
mounted to the front, which is like, it's basically like foam core, but has fiberglass on the front and back instead of paper. So it's like super duper rigid, but it's really lightweight. So even my giant drawings only weigh like 30 or 40 pounds. That gets mounted to the wooden frame, and then over that I use an acid-free paste to paste the paper to, and then I trim the paper down.
And that's before you start drawing, right?
Right.
Yeah. Either way, I'm sure it would be pretty difficult. I love that. And when you talk about the process, is that I imagine, or I found, for example, in oils as well, if you don't plan it out well, once mistakes or things you don't want start happening in the process because you didn't plan for it, it's so hard to. It must be difficult in charcoal too to try to adjust on the fly, especially when working so large, right? So just that value of process, yeah. And
especially if somewhere that I've marked at all, I wish that I'd kept completely white
pure
paper.
whites.
I can't go.
It's hard to get it to that perfect,
Yeah.
the perfect whites.
Yeah.
Do you use a lot of masking or no?
Nope, nothing. Yeah, I just I work vertically, so I keep my paper completely vertical on the wall. So when I rub in these really dark areas, the charcoal just kind of falls to the floor instead of sliding down the paper itself.
And when you work very large, do you just get larger charcoal sticks, or is there?
I use the same size for the most part. I have a bottle of like charcoal powder.
That's what I was going to ask. Yeah, to use that.
Yeah, I have a combination of that, like that. The stuff that Generals makes doesn't get dark enough for me, and so I'll use some of that, like a pile of that powder, but then also crush up my really dark compressed charcoal blocks into that mixture, and then it gets really dark.
That's very interesting. And how do you apply it? How do you apply the powder?
With a towel. Yeah, just like a shop rag from Home Depot. Yeah.
Very cool. Learning about process, yeah. And then you're mentioning that sometimes when you didn't work from photo reference, how do you organize those designs or those images?
I still do I spend more time on a sketch with those. I'll go through, I maybe do 4 or 5 sketches in my sketchbook before I get to one that's like, okay, this is good enough compositionally to go on to like a finished panel. I use a lot of photo references of different regions, like for one series in particular, I was only using photo references from Iceland, another series called Bloodlands. It was about like my Scandinavian heritage. I only used photo references of like fjords from Norway and mountain ranges from Norway and Sweden. And
I was going to say, this is why you're into metal.
Yeah, it's in my blood.
There you go. It all makes sense, yeah.
I was so happy when I found out I was Scandinavian. I did the Ancestry.com.
Yeah.
Like they send you the tube and you spit in it and then you mail it back, and then they, in like 5 weeks, they tell you where all your family came from. And I was like, I'm 50% Scandinavian.
Damn.
But I was like, I've always wished I was part Viking.
And it's a dream come true.
Yeah, I always wished I was more than just like a fan of metal music, but so like now I get to say like, oh no, it's in my heritage.
There's a reason I like this kind of stuff. No, it's
even though it kind of started after I was born. But whatever.
No, it just took you a while to find your roots.
Yeah,
That's all it was.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. How come? I know because you've used some color pastels, I think, in some of your pieces, but it sounded like you're saying you're drawn to black and white grayscale. Always, it seems like you're saying you did some studies in acrylics.
Almost always.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did do a series recently that I was also using red.
Yeah, red and black, great.
Yeah.
Good
White,
combo.
red, and black. No, the alchemical colors. They're like the primal colors, right? Of transformation. But I got asked a lot, why don't you use color? And most of the time it was in defense of black and white. Like there's subtleties and tones and textures in black and white that you can't get the same visual experience from color work. And like I wanted my works to kind of reference old photographs or to like have that sort of like, there's this nostalgia to black and white work, I think, that is part of the like conceptual approach to my process. So black and white feels right. And it's fun. I mean, it's really fun to kind of create limitations for myself, like
for sure.
like and then have to like really expand inside that inside those limitations.
I think the question you mentioned, why don't you use color? I think that's a wrong question. I think that's why it's better to be like, why use black and white rather than, because that's implying that you should, but you don't have to do anything. It's just it's the question started wrong. I think it's the same reason it's interesting to see photographers use black and white, because it really does capture. It helps with capturing a certain emotion, and as far as like talking about constraints, I think it's a interesting way to help yourself produce something more interesting when you have less tools, right?
Yeah, and really, I think like for me, black and white. I mean, the biggest reason for black and white for me is it's just that it matches all of the other sort of conceptual connections I make in my work.
Mm-hmm.
So it like, I want it dark, I want it visceral, I want it metal, I want it fantasy. You know, I want it like black and white just makes sense. Like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It looks great. It's working.
Thanks.
Lots of good choices there. You right now, you just.
I wonder, like though, like that every once in a while, I'm like, I wonder if I tried to do like a really bright color watercolor painting or something right now.
People
like,
are not going to accept you.
Well,
it's too late.
I don't
I'm
even know if I can even do it anymore.
You just see the world in black and white. You don't even realize it.
I just started making monochromatic paintings in different colors.
Oh yeah, yeah. That could also be fun. If you only use like a color Conte or something, or just one type of, pick a pastel color and just go with it.
Yeah, I know. I'd end up like Zaria Foreman or something like that, just doing these massive icebergs. In blue.
What does she use for her paintings?
Soft pastel.
Pastel.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I gotta look her up. You're mentioning you're dropping a lot of artist names. I'm gonna have to re-listen to this and look them up. I'm
sorry, I'm not dropping like concept art.
No, I like them all. No,
I don't know that many of them.
I don't need more concept artists. I'll find them. There's ways. You just mentioned this idea you talked about not waiting for the art gods to appear, but just you get in there, you find a way that works for you. But especially when it comes to an art practice, when you have to produce, whether there's deadlines or art shows or if it's for a job, you can't just expect to sit around and hope that something happens or not. But so what I want to ask you is that being a teacher, how do you ingrain that, or have you found a good way to ingrain that in students?
Yeah, and I don't think my students particularly appreciate it, but I just make them work all the time. I mean, it's just like the things that you can, maybe the most important thing you can learn as an artist in undergraduate art school is that like you got to work your ass off if you're going to keep a practice and get good enough to be professional. I mean, that with that rigor and with that like consistent practice comes a discipline. It comes a familiarity with it. It's like you train yourself, right? It's like training yourself to like be used to doing that all the time, and that's what it takes.
Yeah, I think there is, and there always will be, a misconception that art's supposed to be easy, or you just sit around and wait for something to happen, right?
Yeah. I mean, I've heard through my 20s and 30s that like people are like, wow, you're just so gifted.
You're so talented,
Yeah, and it's like, well, no, I mean, I've been practicing for 20 years, and also I'm like almost $100,000 in debt going to art schools.
Thanks, school.
So I can do this. and they're like, but you have such a gift. And it's like, no, I practice. Like,
it takes time and effort.
Yeah. Like I put energy into this. Yeah. I didn't just wake up.
And I think even for students or for people who are artists, I think that's where you really have to kick that. You have to take that out of their thought.
Well, oftentimes, especially in school. Like oftentimes, like I get a lot of students who are one of two kinds of students. You have one student that's like not very technically skilled, and has a hard time with compositions and materials. Like the whole technical foundation is like young, and they're young, so that's fine. But they have really big ideas, and they have like a lot of energy to put towards learning how to do these things. And then you have the other kind of student, which is like somehow already really good technically at a lot of things, but they don't but they've like coasted through on that technical skill, and they don't have this foundation of like inquiry, of like wanting to know how to portray something better or how to think about something better, and and they're kind of lazy too.
Because they got it for free almost, or
kind of, yeah. I mean, and so it's like you identify these students as like, okay, well, you need more work on technical skill, but you've got like a lot of heart, kid, right? Or you've got the other student that's like, totally full of themselves, but like has stupid ideas. And then you've got to sort of be like, hey, you know, like, go research. You who can paint really well, go research. You who can think really well, like, keep practicing. And then you got to just kind of push them in their own little directions, and hopefully at some point they like walk out the door with their diploma with some sort of sense of like, maybe I can do this.
Naturally, so everyone's kind of got their blind side, right? How much of your job is finding their weaknesses or like pointing out to these other areas that are lacking in? Is that something that?
I mean, it's all preparation. Like the only like I don't feel like I'm gonna get a student that through my tutelage is going to walk out of their undergraduate degree at 21 years old with like all the skills, technical skills, and that they're like, you know, some like art master. It's hard to even teach someone to actually sit down with them with like a watercolor palette and be like, okay, now mix the red with the green, right? Like they took foundation classes that do that, but after that, it's kind of up to them to learn the medium that they want to use. Really, it's just, for me, the main focus is like getting them to think about things in a more advanced way, or like at least set them up with a means to keep going. Like that, like you get them thinking about their art practice in a certain way that when they don't have people telling them what to do anymore, they still want to keep figuring things out and learning more. I'm teaching them how to teach themselves.
You're trying to make it a joke, but I think that's so true. That's to me it seems like
true.
The biggest value that you can get out of school is how to continue gaining knowledge, right? But
it sounds stupid though.
I guess we'll have to find a quote, make it sound smart, but it's so true because how much you're gonna learn in 2-4 years,
as much as you want to, right?
I guess, and hopefully you'll learn how to learn or how to teach yourself, because that's going to be your life probably, unless you keep taking courses, which it's hard to when you have to work and make money that.
Well, I think that's why so many art graduates stall out so quickly. I mean, there's this like staggering statistic that maybe 5% of all art school graduates end up with a job in art after 5 or 10 years. Like it's like minimum. I mean, the fact that, and I don't think that's because there's not a market for it, or there's not like a want from the public to see art places. And it's not that there aren't jobs out there for people or galleries to show their work. I mean, the more work there is to show, the more galleries that will arrive. But it's really just about pushing yourself to keep working on things.
And you're saying, so what happens if people get defeated? You think? Is that why?
Maybe some people get defeated, or maybe it's just like they didn't learn the tools of practice when they were in school. They may have satisfied the criteria to get a passing grade, but if they don't develop some sort of like sense of how they work and how to work on their own, then they won't. I mean, that's what happened to me. I got out of undergrad feeling like I could be a good artist, but I didn't know what to do next. I didn't know, like, I wasn't interested in reading things. I wasn't interested in researching things. I wanted to just sort of like get by on what I was good at already, and I wasn't that good at it. So it was like.
Is it because of how it was taught, or you just?
I think part of it. I mean, part of that falls on the university. But also maybe part of that falls on my upbringing. I don't know, but I mean, I just, for some reason, it was really hard for me to like really push myself through undergrad, and so it took 8 or 9 years after undergrad to really get back to like figuring something out for myself, getting a show, or picking up charcoals again, or.
I feel like I can relate to you saying this because, personally, for me, it took a while to want to seek knowledge, and I sometimes I feel like maybe that's just maturity. I just wasn't smart enough or like aware enough that I should actually seek out knowledge. It felt like a lot of work, where I think it's getting to a point where I kind of needed and I enjoyed, and not just in art but in general.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know about you, but for me it was just wasn't there yet, and I don't know why.
Yeah. Well, I mean, art is hard.
Yeah.
You know, there's not like you can go into like science, or you can go into mathematics or something, and there's like a formula, or even like you could be a surgeon or a lawyer, and there's like, you know, when you're in the operating room and you have to remove somebody's spleen, there's a textbook that taught you how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
There's a method you learned how to do, and you do that method, and you achieve success, and that is the formula, right? Like 2 + 2 is 4, and that's all you need to know.
Mm-hmm.
With art, there's no answer.
Yeah.
Like whatever you want to do is up to you, and there is no right or wrong. There is no formula for success with being a practicing artist, being a professional artist. So it's hard to think about that.
Yeah.
It's hard to motivate yourself. And I think too, like artists oftentimes have this sort of crippling insecurity about how good they are, about what people think about them, because our self-worth is so tied up into something that's really deeply ingrained in our emotional state, right? Like at least I can say that for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard to think about being new at something again, or like, in a way, it's like any kind of research that pushes you towards learning something new is like, you have to be bad at it again, right? You have to be bad at art again. And it's like, if art is the only thing that you're grasping onto for dear life in this insane world, then it's like, I don't want to be stupid again, right? Like, I don't want to show this crappy work to people.
That's so true.
When I could just go back to doing what I was good at before.
Yeah.
Right? And so I think it's really hard for artists to progress confidently.
Yeah. And what makes it even more difficult is when you tie in money into it, which you kind of have to, or just because that also kind of a sign of acceptance or sign of people giving value to it. And once you add that on top of this already like explosive combination, then, maybe that's not the right word, but it's like this volatile concept of being an artist, and you add that to it, just
right.
It makes it difficult.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's like it's like fitting in. Like being a practicing artist is inseparable from this, like, just constant seething, just relentless feeling of insecurity. But at the same time, like, nobody asked you to do this shit, right?
Yeah, it's your own fault. Yeah. Like, can't complain.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that's us who picked this thing. Picked this thing to do. How was studying in the United States for you said undergrad? How was that?
I mean, I'm from the United States, so it was just.
But now you're here. Now you're teaching at a Canadian school.
States. Yeah, Canadian school. It's so much fun teaching at a Canadian school. Yeah.
Well, so that's why I'm asking. Was there? I mean, looking back on it, was it different? Was it cheaper? More expensive?
I mean, I went to a private art college for graduate school, so my tuition was really high. But I got an amazing.
Sounds like it was worth it.
An amazing experience. So it was worth it. I mean, it was worth it. It was worth every monthly payment I send back to my student loan company that I'll be doing for the rest of my life.
You think so?
Well, unless I become world famous artist and start selling a lot of work.
I'm waiting for you to become world famous. So.
Okay. Well, me too.
It's coming around the corner.
Yeah. Where were we?
We were talking about schools.
Yeah. Teaching. Teaching's great. I don't know. There's we talked about this before.
Yeah.
But like, I love teaching, and it's so rewarding. I love helping young people realize their true potential. Honestly, and I have such a good time, and I get so much of my own creative energy from the energy of my students, and they inspire me probably a hell of a lot more than I inspire them. And I like giving back the kind of education that I got from my illustration professor in my undergraduate. Shout out to Kathy O'Connell at Heron School of Art and Design. That kind of spirit in the classroom and energy and camaraderie, I think, that I find with illustration students specifically is like so inspiring to me. And so I need that in a certain way for my own life. I may not need it, but I cherish it. It really like makes me feel so good.
So It's a little distracting. I think so. We're sitting on. I'm
Oh.
sorry to cut into the
That's
story,
all right.
but we're on
It's like
Hastings
was
Street.
did we just witness a?
Someone robbed someone
A
right in front
robbery.
of us here,
Yeah.
and then the guy ran away. I think he took it. Wow.
It was kind of a slow run too, and there was like literally a police car with its lights on.
Yeah, I think the person who stole something already gave up on. They're kind of like, I guess I'm gonna jog.
At least they'll get some exercise.
This is what it's like on Hastings Street. Come
Yeah.
down, Vancouver. You're gonna love it. Back to teaching
All
story.
this stuff about what I love being in Vancouver.
Yeah,
Um,
sorry about that, but
No, that's okay. It was perfect timing.
I was gonna say I
honestly.
couldn't be. This it was definitely. Oof, I feel
Anyways.
bad for that person. Yeah. So you're talking about needing that
Yeah.
inspiration from students.
So, but the drawback is that working full time, teaching full time, takes full time
Yeah.
energy, and coming from the States when I was teaching part time, one class a semester, and then spending most of my time in my studio, and I worked a little retail on the side as well,
Mhm.
just to attempt to pay the bills. I had this nice balance, like a weekly, sometimes daily balance of like teaching and working in my studio. So I was always like helping others with their work and then going back and working on my work. And it kept this like nice rhythm, and it kept me up to date on what I was thinking about too. Teaching full time now, I realize that a lot more of my art practice for myself is happening over the winter break and over the
Mhm.
summer break, and like not much at all during the semester because I'm just so wrapped up in the energy for all of that other stuff. And so it's kind of like, it's kind of sad. I like kind of miss working consistently in my studio. I could probably be further along with my own practice and better at what I do if I did have that more of that time. But like we were talking about, it's like, do you want cake or do you want ice cream? Like
Yeah.
it's two sweet things. Like,
Well,
and
that's a
so
really
it's not
challenging part,
bad
yeah.
to focus on one a little heavier than the other at times.
Well, because personally you get a similar satisfaction from it, I guess, right? The teaching, it's not like you're doing it because it's not just a job. It's something that you also enjoy. It's not just a job to support your painting. It's a thing you enjoy,
Right.
and it helps support your painting.
Yeah, it's not like I get home at the
drawing.
end of the day and I'm like, ooh, well,
Yeah.
at least I'm got the lights on, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
like I get home and I'm fulfilled in the same way that I am fulfilled when I get home from my studio. Like
Yeah.
there's something really
In an
creatively
ideal
satisfying.
world, would you teach less, draw more?
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What is a dream lifestyle?
I think if I don't. Emily Carr isn't a full-fledged research university, so there isn't a strong emphasis on faculty research in the way that some other Research One universities are, where they actually like give certain amounts of time to faculty members to do their own research alongside teaching. And so I think if that was a situation that may change sometime in the future at Emily Carr,
Mhm.
or wherever I may end up someday, that if I could teach maybe 2 classes instead of 3 and then have more time in my studio. Although, honestly, I feel like a lot of the onus of scheduling and time management is all on me. Like, I could spend way more time in my studio if I really wanted to. But I like sitting on my couch, and I like reading books in the morning with my coffee, and
That's also nice.
and I like taking walks and riding my
Having
bike
a
around.
life.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I like
life is
doing
nice.
other things too. I've got friends and people to see, and so it's I don't know. It's
Well, there's a trade-off there.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
yeah. I think it probably, like, every time I think of like, oh, I don't like my situation with my job because I want to make more art, and then I think like, well, okay, that's on me.
That's not true. You speaking? You mean? Is it?
No, I mean it's on, like,
It's on you.
it's my. I mean,
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
I
yeah.
could spend more time in my studio
If you really wanted to.
Yeah, if I really wanted to, and I really need to right now for
Yeah.
this exhibition
Yeah.
in November. So it's like, so I am spending a lot
Yeah.
of time in my studio.
When you teach, do you still manage? How, like, let's say when the classes are happening, how often do you end up being in your studio?
It just depends on my schedule. Like this semester, I've got 2 days off. Like I have a couple double stack classes on one day, so
Mhm.
I end up having like Wednesdays and Fridays off.
Okay.
And I'll have to go in and work in my office some, and there are meetings and other little things to attend to that go along with teaching. But for the most part, I mean, I should be able to get a solid chunk of time on both of those days in my studio, and then a weekend day probably too, maybe both weekend days if I'm busy. But
See, this is this subject of just balancing life and art is I mean, the never ending, the always so confusing and difficult one for everyone to realize, especially when you're not a working artist. Right?
Yeah, and it is a little like there is a convenience to a deadline for me.
Oh, yeah.
At
Yeah,
least.
yeah,
I mean,
same.
like I had all summer to work on these drawings for this for this show, and I just like I tried here and there to work on it. And it like wasn't coming out, and there's just some part of me that knows like you just gotta wait.
Was it too
until,
comfortable?
Like, the 11th hour, right?
Yeah.
Like you just have to wait until there can be no more waiting,
Yeah.
and then you'll make all the best work.
This is why I think when I'm in the midst of it and I have full-time work and a couple of like commissions or something to finish, that's when I'm like, oh, you idiot. But then otherwise, when I got nothing to really work on, it can be difficult, like you're saying, without that little deadline somewhere waiting for you. It's definitely harder to get somewhere. I'm trying to correct that in myself, because I know it's my like broken mindset, probably the way. I'm sure I can trick myself, and I've been finding ways to trick myself into producing work without deadlines, because I realized I think I need that. I work well with set goals. Just making art, just practicing sometimes doesn't seem enough.
So how do you feel about the deadline though?
The deadline? I enjoy it. It can be very difficult with a full-time job,
Yeah.
but I like it, and you're just gonna put that extra effort. And as we were talking about constraints earlier, that's just another constraint on top of your art. And you most likely, it's not that the more the better, but a fine amount of constraints is nice, and time is a good one to have as well.
Yeah, I mean, the deadline as far as like time management and procrastination, I think is a sort of, there are positives and negatives about being a procrastinator.
But also problem solving, right? Like, what are you going to do in that time? One thing so before the podcast, we talked about illustration and how it can have fine art in it, and can have graphic design in it. It can take on a lot of other areas and can still be illustration. The whole idea of illustration is kind of vague too.
What is illustration?
Yeah, we're trying to figure that out before. There's a Wikipedia answer somewhere. But
even that Wikipedia entry was kind of like vague.
I can read it in a second. But so I feel like when it comes to problem solving and time, I remember every once in a while we'll be like working on a project, and whether it's just difficult because of a surface area that I'm painting, like painting a piano or something. I remember I did that for Keys to the Streets. Or if you're painting a mural and you're going to have a week, but it's a giant wall, so if you're you can be smart about it and design something great that is manageable in a time when the resources you're given, how many colors you're going to get, are you going to be doing really soft fades? And so sometimes those restrictions make me make better decisions, because I end up leaning my artwork a little bit more towards graphic design kind of work, maybe a little bit more clean.
Okay, so you change your mindset about.
It's almost like maybe those silhouettes read better. Maybe there's more interesting shapes. Maybe not everything has to be rendered, because, nothing ever has to be rendered.
Right.
And then so every once in a while, these kind of restrictions make you discover something cool, and it ends up taking a better direction than you would. Because if you have a year on one painting, you're going to render it out like crazy. But
Right.
Is that really going to make it great? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the one thing I really appreciate about procrastination is that
Nobody ever said that.
Yeah, I think a lot of artists secretly, like if they had a guilty pleasure, it would be their procrastination. There's something about procrastination that forces you, like when it's time. Okay, so like when it's time to make the work, and there is no other time to make it, and it has to be made then.
Yeah.
There is something really wonderful about it forcing you to make essential decisions, right? You have to like let go of everything that doesn't absolutely matter. And it also is this like internal look at like what really matters to me about this work. And it may change you to make or may like force you to make different design decisions with it. It may make you like leave whole parts out. There is something really like humbling in a way, or revealing about yourself with procrastination. Also, it's really frustrating, because it just like you think of all the time you had to work on it and how little sleep you're going to get now, and
Everyone's listening. Everyone's nodding.
Yeah. So I don't know what to say about procrastination.
Before I think I want to touch a little bit more on your process and your materials, but is there anything you wanted to bring up? I don't know if subjects you want to chat about. What's been on your mind lately? What's bugging you?
Not much is really bugging me. I feel pretty.
Life is very good.
Life's okay. Yeah, life's okay. I'm wondering where the big art scene is in Vancouver.
Yeah, where is
there's
that?
When I got up here, there's I remember in Portland and even in Indianapolis, there was these first Thursday events, first Friday events where every gallery in town has their monthly opening on the same night. So there's this parade of people around town going to all these shows.
That sounds nice.
Schmoozing and meet, and everybody gets to see all their friends and network and all that. And it becomes a sort of celebratory time. Everybody knows, all of the galleries, we can go see all of the art tonight.
That's so cool. I've never experienced that. That sounds amazing.
Well, that's an initiative. When I first moved here, I was there's no first Friday thing happening here.
Well,
I got to make that happen. But it takes way too much work.
But that's why I asked
somebody needs to make that happen.
Yeah. That's why I asked you about the scene, is that in even, let's say, the amount of galleries you see here compared to, Portland.
There's a ton of galleries
there
here.
is.
Just there's no. Maybe I could be completely ignorant of this just because I haven't been here and I haven't put in the time looking. But to me, it appears, and it may appear to the general public, that there is no there is no one source where we can go to know everything that's happening on, if everything could just happen at once.
It's a great idea if you can wander through 6 shows in one night.
I mean,
it so cool.
drums up so much more attention for the communities you're in,
and then you manage to, because as one show, as one artist, it's hard to bring enough people together, for example. But I think, like you're saying, as a community of artists, you do this one thing once a month. I mean, that
right.
totally
It's
makes
if
sense.
you got one gallery opening this Thursday and then another one next Tuesday and then another one the Wednesday after that, it's okay, well, I'm only going to go out one night to one show, so I guess I got to pick which one.
That's what it feels like it's been like. But then again, I wonder if the fact, I'm telling you I don't know if there's enough galleries is because it's because of how many events they do or something. I'm probably wrong,
I don't know. I just wish there was
because I feel like I know the art community, but I don't see enough shows from the art community that I'm in touch with. And it's not like I know the whole Vancouver, or I know a certain amount of artists that do a certain kind of work, probably.
I don't know.
It'll be interesting.
Yeah.
I should probably do some more research on that.
Me too.
Instead of sitting and complaining here. That's me.
Why can't I see more art?
I know.
Because I just don't go out that much.
I guess you have to seek it out. It's like you're saying, where's one
everything,
place?
everything in the art world that I complain about, I end up, it's just well, actually, it's just me.
I don't know. Because you're teaching illustration at Emily Carr, and I feel like Emily Carr has a lot of graduates that go quite deep into conceptual artwork, and you're the illustration teacher, so you have to pull them back a little.
Well, it was really confusing because about 6 years ago there was an instructor at Emily Carr, or maybe less than that some recent graduates will remember. He was very industry oriented. He was he burnt a lot from the faculty side. He burnt a lot of bridges with painting and drawing and design.
Give us a name or no?
No.
Okay.
They'll know who he is, and it doesn't really matter who it was. Anyways, so then the department sat kind of empty of leadership for a little while. Really focused leadership. A lot of the faculty members that were keeping it alive, who were full-time, were coming in from other departments. And so when my colleague Daniel and I were both hired last summer, we showed up, and I think we were both hired because we had this sort of understanding of illustration in the context of not just in the industry, but also contemporary art. And so with Emily Carr's illustration program being still under the roof of the O'Dane Faculty of Art and not communication design, that there was still this push to keep illustration an art practice and not an industry oriented practice, that it was still a fine art, right? Not that we use that term that much anymore. And so a lot of the students during that time before Daniel and I showed up didn't have much like specific direction. Vancouver is a huge community of concept artists, and like the video game and movie industry is just exploding here, and so there are a lot of opportunities for that, and I think a lot of students are really attracted by that, and they should be, and this is the place to go to be part of that and to learn how to do those things. And so, but with illustration being in the fine art department, it seemed like there was always this like pull back, like you were saying, like this sort of downplaying of the digital side of things, downplaying of the commercialized industry side of things, and kind of this callback to the golden age of illustration, of children's books and comic books and things like that, which is fine, but really it needs to be both.
For sure.
And so, like even now, like tomorrow is my first day of class in a class on concept art, and it's the very first class of concept art offered by a full-time faculty member at the university, and it's like way overcrowded already. But they're like dying for this thing, and so instead of like trying to instead of like trying to discourage students from like really following that because we're a fine art program, like make it work, like bring it in.
Yeah, it's how you keep the balance, because I guess, you know, the goal of an art school, should it really, this is the question, should it be to help someone find a job in the arts, or should it be to enlighten someone and give them a way to look at art in a different way, and like we talked about, finding a way to learn? Because both goals are fine, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think those should both be there for a student depending on what
to
they
choose
want.
from, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
And they could have both if they want both.
Yeah, I guess that's the ideal way. So whatever you want to do, you know, it's up to you.
Right.
What do you want to do with your degree when you're done, right?
Yeah.
It would be nice if we lived in a world where you didn't have to care about, you know, making a living with it or something else, right? So it kind of plays into it, but I can see how it can also get in the way of you becoming a better artist by just worrying too much about making it applicable in the commercial.
Yeah, I mean, if the learning curve is too, I mean, if the hill's too steep to climb right out of school, like on your own, then most people won't do it. But I think if the opportunity's there, then they'll take it. So it's fun to try and create new courses that start to bridge that gap. Between. I mean, I really like this idea of having an illustration class where you can talk about like the materiality of a painting, or like you can talk about like activating the space of something, right? Or like subverting hegemony or whatever you know, like very conceptual contemporary terms. But then you can also talk about like industry guidelines and mood boards and I don't know, like visual narrative and comic book paneling and things like that, like in the same class. Like getting illustrators prepared to talk about gallery work but then also prepare them to talk about the industry that they want to go into. It's like, I mean, that's not gonna. It can only help.
I think the fact that what you're talking about, the combining those, seems so important, because the alternative that you see online, or what you get in the especially commercial fields, is that it ends up looking a little too the same. It looks commercial, not in a good way, and that's because they're only. It's almost like you're talking about a student who like needed to go do some more research or something. Because like if you're doing, you know, let's say concept art or design on surface level, you're just doing the same dude in the same armor, the same, and because you can, there's a way of doing design and all. And when I say design, I mean concept art. There's a way of creating, imagining things with context that's deeper, that goes beyond just this guy's gonna go kill someone. Like how many more games and movies do you need to see about things killing each other, or like, can you actually
more apparently?
Well, exactly. People are simple, but
too many.
But it doesn't have to be that way. What if there's actually some sort of meaning in there? And it can be, and so that's why when you talk about
why does he have to kill this person,
or does he have to kill the person? You know?
I know what you mean. I mean, there seems to be this like there's a big divide in art schools, I think, between like say the painting department. A classic example of like the studio painters an artist who's a studio painter, and I've experienced this for myself because I work in a studio all by myself, and all I think about is myself all day long, and what I want to see, and how I want to say it, and what I want people to hear, and how I want people to perceive me and my artwork. And so there's this like kind of I think when you get a group of people together like that, there's a pretty severe elitism when it comes to like, I am an artist. I'm a high, that's just like highbrow art, right? I'm completely autonomous, as if they believe that they're not part of some commercial industry of like putting paintings on gallery walls and selling them. They're just as commercial as illustrators who get paid to draw characters, right? But then there's the other aspect. There's like the other side of the spectrum of a lot of illustration students or animation students even feel like they're just mechanics. Yeah. Like they're taught how to use tools, and they're taught how to make something look like something, and then that's just what you do. And so there has to be something in between being a mechanic and being an elitist asshole that like makes you a great artist, right?
Yeah. And I'm also, when you're speaking about this, what makes me think of is how many artists who were taught to be mechanics are kind of lost in, once you have freedom of having any voice you want, a little lost about what to even pursue, because you have these amazing tools, but what are you going to do with them? And so that's the alternative that you should have, that's the other side of the coin, where the conceptual side that you need to embrace to kind of combine those two to produce something that's very interesting.
And I mean, I think that's where it really comes back to that. Like, if like any work you make is going to ring kind of hollow if there isn't this, like, if you don't have a deep investment in the subject, and if you're not invested, if you're just learning tools and you're just a mechanic, then like, what do you have to say? Yeah, not much. And if you don't learn to want to have a voice and want to have a say in something, then like, that's all you're going to do, especially if it pays the bills.
So true. So true.
You know, like, why want more?
Mm-hmm. When did you realize you have something to say, or when did you stumble upon something or find it? 'Cause that's a difficult one.
Again, I think it was grad school.
Man,
I mean,
so worth it, huh?
I think. Well, I mean, so much of my experience of grad school and all of these, like all the things I've laid out of big lessons that I learned in grad school, was all me sort of coming to terms with the fact that I'm a contemporary artist and not just an illustrator, like a trade illustrator. And I think that any artist practicing right now, we are in the times of contemporary art. So like, whether you like it or not, if you're a practicing artist right now, you're a contemporary artist. And contemporary art is really about finding new connections between things, because a lot of people think everything's already been done, right? So now it's taking all those things that have already been done and combining them and seeing what happens in between those, and what new things, new realizations happen. And that's what it took for me. And that's like that. That's just like finding those connections was really what made me realize, like, oh, this is the kind of work that I need to be doing. And it wasn't latching on to some big movement, some big cultural trend with art. It wasn't latching onto a style movement in illustration or anything like that. It was like taking the basic things that I really liked in my life, that are things I appreciated. I liked landscapes. I liked going and looking at beautiful mountains. I liked metal music. I liked ecology, learning about trees and how forests regenerate and things like that. I really like melancholy stuff. I like darkness and fantasy. I like Lord of the Rings. That kind of, those like tragic worlds. And I found a way to make artwork that combines those things in an original way. And that's all I needed.
Did it feel like learning to be you? It sounds cheesy, but
well, I mean, I looked at a big inspiration for me. I think the big pivotal moment for me in school was I did this art residency at an art center down in Central Oregon called Caldera Art Center. And the art center is situated on a large plot of land that about 16 or 17 years ago had this massive wildfire burn through the whole place. I mean, it's like Deschutes National Forest, like pretty old trees, not old growth trees, but like old trees. The whole place went up in smoke, burnt out the entire valley, that the art center's in, right around the art center actually. And so the landscape there is this like, it's just all rubble, like pebbly rubble. There's no grass. There are a few like little manzanita shrubs growing back, but all of the old trees are just these like burnt black snags, these empty barren trunks everywhere, and it looks like a nuclear bomb went off. But there are like birds coming back now, and there are some small plants growing, and there's like little shoots of baby trees coming up, and I think a lot of the, like, for me personally, the kind of lifestyle and life that I left behind in Indiana when I realized that I was sick of making artwork for other people. Not that it wasn't gratifying, but it wasn't enough, and that I needed something to say for myself. Situating myself in that environment that was like all about ecology and death and renewal and rebirth and brutality and fire and lightning and all this other stuff. Maybe a couple goats in there too running around. But when I realized that I was in a place that reflected how I felt and and I was making work that also reflected that, it was like everything just clicked into place, and it was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
The magic realization, the sky opened up.
I was like, oh,
you're given this moment. That's really cool. And so I think I saw on your website the piece you did did you paint a map, right?
I actually was commissioned by the art center to go back, and there were a bunch of trails that were sort of lost after the fire happened. So I went back and hiked all the trails, charted them on USGS geological survey maps, and then like created this landscape that is like has all the trails there, because most of the artists and residents that go there like don't even know that there's all these trails out there, and it's like, well, you got to show them. They got to get out there. Like I went out there and like lost my shit. It was so incredible. Like
it's like you got to draw it up and scare them not to go in that direction. It all looks dark and black. Makes it exciting.
Yeah.
What's frustrating about your story is that you know, I'm doing this podcast. Hopefully we can all learn from, have some takeaways, and there's many, but you know, the takeaway from your enlightening moment is that because the takeaway is that you don't know when it's going to happen, that you're going to find, and it clicks. You know what I mean? In
hindsight, it was very clear that like that's exactly where I had to be when it had to click.
But as a takeaway, as a lesson, is it just, did you get out of your comfort zone? Is that what happened? I mean,
Not really. It was like, if I could give advice to somebody,
recreate a similar experience to finding themselves.
Yeah. So it's like looking back now, what I needed.
Yeah.
And what happened, what happened in order to get me to that place where I had this sort of epiphany about the kind of work I wanted to make, and the work has changed a lot since then, still. But what I do see as understanding what was needed at the time, and what I sort of happened upon in a way, maybe not coincidentally, because I did do the work and I did put myself in the position to create. I did create opportunities for myself that would lead me to that point. But what it really took was like understanding all of the things in my life that inspired me,
that you cared about.
Maybe not all of them, but a select number of them, and figuring out how, like, where those connected, like in the Venn diagram of all my interests, what's the center point, and being in that burnt out. In that forest, like that dead forest was like right where I needed to be.
That's really well put together. I'm trying to digest it all here because it can be complicated and simple at the same time, because if it is just figure out what you like and embrace it and go for it.
Well, it's like there's plenty of trends to follow, and there's plenty of like social movements that you can get behind and that you can be passionate about. And I'm not saying don't do those, and I'm saying, and I would also say that like if that's part of your interest, that like if activism is part of your interest, or if feminism, or I don't know,
or elephants and goats.
Yeah, I mean, if like saving the elephants is your thing, then like maybe that's part of what your art practice should be about. And maybe you don't have to paint elephants, but like if there's something that like calls people to action towards something that you're really passionate about, or makes people think about or consider things that you're really passionate about. Like, I don't need people to know that I like blast metal in my earphones when I work as a conceptual approach, not just because I like listening to music, but it puts me in that mindset. Like I don't need people to know that, but I think maybe some of that, like if they found out, looking at my work, they'd be like, oh, I could see that, right?
I love that I was scrolling through Instagram. You had a post where like, hey, metal bands, if you need some artwork, hit me up. And I was
Oh
like,
yeah,
totally.
Oh yeah,
Makes
that would.
sense.
I think
Makes
that would
sense.
be an alternate dream job. Yeah,
Yeah,
if
okay.
I wasn't going to teach, I would just work in my studio full time making album covers for
Hey,
black metal bands.
it makes sense. Do you want to drop some names that bands that you listen to?
Sure. Some of my favorite bands, mostly black metal bands.
Oh, really dark.
Yeah,
I'm not even-
black metal specifically. There's a lot of subgenres of
Exactly,
metal.
that's what I was
and
gonna say.
I don't like all of them. I only like a particular few. I think metal fans will all understand how particular we can get about our bands, but mostly Cascadian black metal, American black metal, and of course, obviously, like the original black metal. I listen to Wolves in the Throne Room, Behemoth, both who are playing here in
Yeah.
November.
Ooh, treat.
Dimmu Borgir, Immortal, Abbot, Shrine, Sumac.
Oh, you get dark then. You really get deep. See, I was for me it started. I remember. I don't think like Korn is not a metal band. It was like
Yeah, like new metal.
it was Entrance, and then it was like Slipknot, and then it was
Right. Slipknot
like-
got a little heavier.
yeah, and it was, and then if you get into Meshuggah or something.
Yeah,
would be-
Meshuggah's a little fringe, like you're kind of standing at
Yeah.
the edge of like
See, and I was
of like palatable metal.
Are you
like,
trying to tell me I'm not cool enough to be? That's what I was gonna say. So
You're not specific enough. That's all.
exactly.
Yeah.
If you're listening and you're
Everybody needs that
Yeah.
gateway band, right?
Yeah.
That's kind of like traditional metal that like opens the door, and then you're like, oh, why am I listening to something a little darker or something a little more brutal or more adventurous or faster, and then that starts to point you in the direction.
Are you
of
gonna
the
go to
subgenres.
Dragon Force or Iron Maiden? What are you gonna do? But
Exactly.
But that's why. But for me, it seems like as time went on, it's been more towards the quite a lot of instrumental, but more towards what is it, prog, progressive metal, I guess.
Yeah,
That's-
prog metal.
And it's been like, and it seems to be this kind of the. I guess I don't know if I want to say new, but these bands were really trying to push the syncopations and push the timing and. Yeah, but it seems to me it's like what the black metal stuff you talk about is so classic. To me, it's like it's so deep, so dark, and it's so
Yeah.
It's like it's a definition, of
Well,
it.
the reason I associate black, like I like black metal so much specifically, is that it's like almost intolerable music for a lot of people.
So true, so
Um,
true.
But it is, but there's something so visceral about it.
Yeah.
And I think if you like conceptually related to my work, like the origins of black metal, like kind of all started out as a sort of rejection of the status quo, kind of like reclamation of ancient knowledge. Oftentimes it was this like wishing to go back before Christianized times to like more pagan,
Yeah.
earth-based beliefs, religious belief systems, and also this like embracing of the darkness and the unknown, right? This sort of like visceral, sublime sort of mind state. And so that's like really like black metal is really related to my artwork in that sort of in that sort of way, and so maybe there's aspects of my work that are kind of intolerable or too specific or too scary, or I don't know. There are aspects of the unknown in my work that I like to come through in the same way that I feel this like in the same way that I viscerally respond to black metal music. And oftentimes, and there's something really fun about having this, it's like an inside joke with people, but it may not be a joke, but it's like people, I know that I will have like mega fans of my work that get all those little connections to black metal and stuff. And so and I think that comes with most art forms, that like if you can find something that you like really nerd out about, that like gets all your, like pushes all your geek buttons, put it in the work. I mean,
Sneak it in.
what would you rather be doing?
Yeah.
Really? I mean, like if there's any, if I could offer any takeaway to artists not sure what they want to do, like just do the thing you would rather do than anything else.
That's such a good advice. I like how you can draw those parallels between the aspects you like in other, like in music and just other arts. And
Yeah.
how to find it back.
Yeah.
I gotta, You I like how you said that some metal music is just some people. It's like you're saying, it's meant to sound distorted, and I guess that's why some people don't get it, but sometimes I'm surprised that I like it.
I mean, it's pretty conceptual, really. Like,
Yeah.
it's like
It is actually
purposefully they make it to sound horrible because they want you to not like it. Like, the
Such a
point
good
is
parallel.
to not like it. But the benefit of that, and this is like a great term that was coined by one of my previous students, shout out to Angie, is this concept of like secret over tolerance. And so there's like the music is intolerable for most people,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like, but if you know the secret of it, then you like it for other reasons beyond the noise.
Yeah.
And then at some point the noise you start to like the noise too.
The noise sounds good. Yeah, yeah.
And
Man, you broke it down so well. I'm gonna have to rethink my metal choices.
you just really start listening to metal.
But it's so much fun and it's so energetic, and yeah, it can be and is very positive when it may not sound like so. I get a lot of yeah.
Well, it relates to my practice, and I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's plenty of people that like make work that is inspired by dubstep and and your intro song, and
No hate, come on, no hate.
no hate, it's fine. There's room for everyone.
That's right.
But it's fun having this, it's kind of a secret.
It
in
is a
way.
secret, yeah, so true. And then when you go to a concert, and you're like, oh, all of us get it. You guys,
Yeah.
we're this little community, and yeah.
I mean, I would rather appeal to people I would rather appeal overwhelmingly so to a few small people than to make work that everybody likes on a surface level.
What
You know?
happens if all of a sudden you become really popular and everyone likes your work? Are you going to question yourself? Like, am I pop now?
If I moved to Sweden, I probably would be super popular
Ooh.
because everybody loves metal in Sweden. I'm just not with my people.
I was going to say, I'm curious. What if you give it a try? No, just start shipping work.
It's a
You know,
labor of
find a
love.
gallery. Find a
I do
gallery.
need to find a
ship it.
gallery
And
and-
you're
yeah.
working on paper. You just roll it up. Let them figure
That's
it out.
cheap. Yeah.
Do you have a good fixative for charcoals?
I use a few different ones. Selenier makes a really nice one. Lascaux, like the caves,
Oh yeah.
is the most expensive fixative. I don't know. When it comes to charcoal fixatives, you get what you pay for.
Well, and it's so finicky. It's so scary to mess it up because it's so easy to.
I bought
touch
this
it the wrong way.
workable fixative from Krylon one
Oh,
time,
no.
the spray paint company, and
Nope.
I didn't do a test or anything, and I just got this drawing out. This is probably 10 years ago, but I got this drawing out. I was like, I'm just gonna spray fix this and keep working on it. I sprayed it, and it dissolved half the drawing. It was terrible. Test your fixatives, people.
Should we just say it now? You suck, Kyle. Thanks for ruining a painting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everyone. I'm sure everyone had the moment of just varnishing wrong or something, or putting some.
Well, I don't know. Every time I bitch, it just comes back to
It's all your
me.
fault.
Yeah,
It's all your fault.
I didn't do a test strip first. I wouldn't have ruined that painting if I just tested it first.
You have a good perspective. I'll adapt it as well. It's all well, and it's true. Yeah. I messed
If you don't
all
like
up.
it, it's probably your fault.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. So true.
Hmm.
I have to teach everyone. I hope you're teaching your students to think that too. You screwed up.
I don't know. There's
It's
a lot.
honest.
There's a lot to learn from mistakes.
I want to go back a little bit to your materials because I think there's another photo. So, like I said, your Instagram was very full of knowledge and insight, and I kind of want to ask
Thanks.
more. There's I think you did a post something about talking about the Strathmore 400 series sketchbook that you're.
Oh
working
yeah,
with.
yeah.
And I think you mentioned something like that it was with the what is it? B paper
B
super
paper. Yeah.
B paper super deluxe.
Super deluxe. Mixed media.
So tell me more. Do you nerd out on these art materials? Do you get really specific with what you use?
I'm. I wouldn't say I'm like a connoisseur of paper, but I'm
Getting there.
I'm very particular about my paper.
Yeah.
I only work with a few different kinds of paper because they have the surface quality, the three things that are important to me about paper are one, that they have enough tooth that I can get really the darkest darks.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they certain papers will burnish down too quickly and it just gets shiny and flat.
Yeah.
So printmaking papers for me are oftentimes have just enough tooth in them, but not too much where it gets really gritty. I like a little bit of gritty, but not a lot. That the paper's thick enough that I can really really rub into it and not it doesn't
Make a
either
hole?
fuzz up
Yeah,
or
yeah.
make a hole. Yeah. and then like the kind of white. Like the charcoals I use are like a warm black as opposed to a cool black, and so like I like working on warmer white paper than cool white paper, just so it sort of
feels like it fits.
so the
on top
tones
of it.
match. Yeah.
That's interesting. I haven't even thought of that. I guess it makes sense that so you can buy cool and warm charcoals.
Yeah, some charcoal. Yeah, I mean, if you spend like the big bucks on the really expensive charcoals, you can get like any color you could think of, and like 3 dozen different different black charcoals, black colors. But I'm pretty loyal to one specific brand of charcoal, and it's honestly just this really cheap compressed black charcoal, but it gets darker than any other charcoal.
They got to sponsor you.
But then you get, there's like certain soft pastels, like soft pastel black that's not compressed charcoal, but it's like a pastel that's mixed with an oil. It gets even darker, but it's smeary, and it's like too velvety and like it smears. It's like
That's pastels, yeah.
it's like too viscous. It's like putting too much water on your brush. Like the pigment keeps going further than you want it to, and it's hard to erase.
Is it possible to make your own charcoal
Yeah.
sticks? Yeah. Have you just compressed some charcoal at home?
I don't make compressed. I don't know how to make compressed charcoal, but I know how to make vine charcoal.
And how is it?
You get a bunch of like willow. Oftentimes you have willow, so you get like young willow sticks, branches. Cut them into 4 or 5 inch lengths. Load them up in a coffee can.
Okay.
Like a metal coffee tin, fill it like completely full, like you got a bunch of pencils in there. You poke a hole in the lid, fix the lid on nice and tight, put it in a fire,
Okay.
and you wait a little while. Smoke will start coming out of the hole in the lid. Leave it in there, just wait, and then you wait until the smoke stops coming out of the hole. You take the can out, you set it out for a night. Next day you come back, open it up, and you have a bunch of charcoal sticks.
Damn. If you're a purist, you gotta go that way. Do you do that often?
No, you know when I was out in that burn in Oregon and drawing, I did this one experiment where like I went up to a burnt tree and I broke some charcoal from its bark off the tree, and I sat down and I drew the tree with its own charcoal.
Ooh.
And I drew the tree like it was still alive.
Yeah.
And it was this
Talk about conceptual.
It was like Circle of Life, Lion King kind of thing, and that is profound. It is like the idea of that is profound, but it's also like it's so cliche.
I was gonna say that it needs to go a level deeper or something.
I mean, I like the idea that I'm using a burnt wood to draw burnt wood, but it's not so conceptual that like it becomes this gimmick of like, oh, he drew that tree with the charcoal from that tree.
It's a little too obvious, I guess, at this point, right?
Well, it's like it takes and then all the emphasis, all the importance about the artwork is that process and not like what you're actually looking at. It's like it's an excuse to not even investigate the technical qualities of a piece of art.
Yeah.
If you're so focused on like how it was made.
And that happens to a lot of art, I think, where the story overtakes the art piece itself, and the value is the story, right? Is more so than a piece. I wonder. I mean,
you were talking to Andrew on his episode, Andrew Domakowski,
yeah.
about painterly marks and how like the difference between like people want that photo bash look, right? Photographic look. It's easier to sell something because they don't have to imagine it. They don't have to use their creative part of their brain to like get it. And it's that same kind of thing. Like here we are back talking about the problems with contemporary art, conceptual art. Is
Can't
like
escape it.
Yeah, it's like it makes me so mad sometimes, but then it's like, well, no, it's just as important as everything else. That it's like what it really comes down to is like, where do you want your focus to be? Like, what's the most important thing about the work you're making? Is it the process you went through to make it? Is there like some clever thing you did? Is the idea that inspired it the most artistic aspect of the work, or is it the technical quality? Is it your rendering? Is it what people see? Is it the expression on the people's faces that you painted? It's always it's always a choice, right? I could do that other thing, but then it's like I don't want to be that guy that does that thing.
And then once again, it goes back to then knowing your values and things you like, and that's what you're gonna choose out of the
Yeah.
elements you're talking about, right? I really need to get a contemporary, well, not contemporary, like modern artist in here and just get into this questioning, because like you're saying, if your interests, going back to the example of the things you like,
Mhm.
you know, metal and fantasy, if those are your interests and you're translating them, and you clearly care about process and you care about technique at the same time as you care about mood and
Mhm.
the conceptual side of it. So when I see your work and when you speak about this, it's not a surprise to me that that's what you care about,
Mhm.
because I've seen your
Mhm.
work. And so I wonder how much of this approach to art translates into a really, into something that's really striking and surprising and shocking piece of that's modern. It's like, you said like a bunch of underwear tied or something like into knots.
Right. Well, it's just like, where do you want to turn the volume up on what you're making? Like,
Mhm.
what do you want people to pay the most attention to? And if you want them to pay attention to the spectacle of something, or if you want them to pay attention to the emotional feedback.
And I guess in the end, do you want them to pay attention to the fact that it's even made by a person, right? Or
Yeah.
like, is it even about the artist, right? Because that's where it goes when it's
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
found art, and So
Yeah, one
No,
of my
there's
graduate
no right
mentors
way.
was always talking about there's all these crossfaders of different things. There's
Mhm.
there's
Yeah.
culture, there's technical skill, there's rendering, there's color, there's
Mhm.
figure, and all that you can move these levels up and down on everything, like this board right in front of us, right? And you can like turn up the volume on different things, and you can
That's a great way to looking
Yeah.
at it. I think, yeah. Even
Yeah.
just visualizing, you don't want everything to be on top. You just have to pick
right.
one or two. Yeah.
Yeah,
Man, I'm learning so much from you. This is very
I
good.
am a teacher.
That's right. Oh yeah. I should have known this is how it's gonna go. And we're slowly running out of time, so let's get into, I guess, a couple of final questions. I don't know if you wanted to add anything else, but I wanted to. Let's see. Let me just scroll through the sheet. Oh, one thing before we get into final questions, I want to ask is that I really appreciated the fact that you used a blue pencil in your drawings, because once again, coming from animation background, like the color
Yeah,
color
the
pencils,
non-photo
like,
blue.
that's where that's how it was done. And I for the longest time, and still I would be in my sketchbook, I would sketch out roughs and then with a color erase and then go on top of it, like, and define it. But what made you choose that medium?
I like the blue pencil. I mean, I always enjoyed sketching in a color pencil, but it was always frustrating to have to keep sharpening that color pencil. And so then I found that Pentel makes these like little mechanical pencil leads, blue pencil leads. So I put in a mechanical pencil, and I've always got a nice sharp point. And so rendering, especially if I'm doing something in black and white as a finished product, there's like really high contrast. There's like a wide range of tone, like the tonal range is all the way like 0 to 100. When I'm working with the blue pencil, it only goes like 0 white to maybe 60. And so I can work out these like really subtle tonal shifts without going all the way to black in my sketch, which is like hard to erase, right? It's hard to come back from all the way black. So working in blue is great, because then when I scan it in, it's still like a gray drawing, and then I can push the levels out further.
It's almost out of necessity, huh? It's a necessity
like
for the
lighter.
process.
Yeah, it is, but it became a necessity out of working in that way in the beginning. I don't know, it's weird.
No, that's really fascinating how you arrived to it and the reasons.
Yeah.
The fact that your tools are not exactly accidental, but it's all meant to be there to get to the final.
I think if I was going to start from scratch again, I might, and not knowing this process, I may not have gone in the same route. But
interesting.
it doesn't smear as much as a pencil does. I don't know.
What books are you reading right now, or what are you reading with your coffee in the morning?
So a lot of my research is also about ecology and sort of like the end of human existence.
I love
which
it.
is what I kind of portray in my work, right? These like mountains crumbling into white chasms. So global ecological crisis is on my mind a lot. Climate change is on my mind a lot. The impact of 7 billion people on the planet is on my mind a lot. And so I read a lot about ecological concerns. It gets me thinking about the melancholy that I associate with this sort of like the planetary grieving process we all have to go through with the sixth mass extinction on its way. People, things will never be the same. So I read a lot of newer writers. I'm reading Paul Kingsnorth, who's a pretty visionary British guy, focuses on sort of post-environmentalism mentality about the world.
Does he have a darker outlook?
It's a pretty dark outlook. Yeah.
Fits with your...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Fits very well. But then also just nature writers. Timothy Morton writes a lot about the Holocene and the Anthropocene and like these like scenes that humanity is going through and how the changes are affecting the world. And a little bit of Wendell Berry, like his poetry. He writes about living on a farm and growing his own shit. And,
nice.
And I, poetry. Yeats, Robert Graves. I don't know. I read a lot of weird stuff, but it all seems to be kind of nature based.
Yeah. It all fits too. Once again, like your interest and helps with the art. I like what you're talking about before, that your interests are really translated into the artwork. So even when you're not doing art research, it's following your other interests. They inevitably go back to that.
Yeah, I'm also like deep in the Delilah Dirk series. That's been
out. Yeah. I gotta
comics.
get that. It's actually
so good.
Tony, right? Tony Cliff. Man, hey Tony, I don't know if you listen to this, but I gotta meet you. Work at the same company. I haven't met the guy.
Come on, Tony.
Yeah, I gotta. Actually, I'm gonna make sure. I was flipping through. I gotta get his. I only got one. I gotta get his books at Art Breakers. Speaking of which, see, I was just thinking about that. You and I just talked for 2 hours, and there's still so much to talk about. We didn't even get into like, hey, what are you doing for Art Breakers? Are you preparing for that? How are you preparing for Art Breakers? Give me a quick answer.
Well, so because I'm represented by a gallery, I'm not selling. I don't make prints of any work that I would consign to them, because I don't want to. It's just like issue of devaluing the work by selling prints, that kind of thing. I don't want to create two different markets for the same work.
Okay.
So a lot of the work that is on pretty much all the work that's on my website is not what I'll be selling there. But the other work I do, which is more like illustration style stuff, I do some, actually some like hand pulled screen prints.
Sweet.
That are like inspired by some John Muir quotes. I'll have a screen print there that's like from The Hobbit, a little image from The Hobbit that I did, and then a bunch of pen and ink drawings.
Awesome.
I do a lot of little like black line art, micron pen drawings, like highly detailed drawings of forest scenes and things like that. So I'll have some prints of those and just random little fun stuff.
Can't wait. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
What advice would you give your younger self before undergrad?
Before undergrad?
Yeah.
Don't waste your time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to listen to.
Work harder.
True.
Yeah. I recall so many nights in undergrad of like pulling an all-nighter doing the final for the critique the next morning and not spending a minute of time on it before that. And I really lost out.
Yeah.
It took me a long time to like catch up from that after undergrad.
That's tough, because you won't know until you have to work hard, or you won't know it until you do it. Yeah.
Maybe that's why I have this like love-hate relationship with procrastination.
Yeah.
But because I still pulled off fairly good work, but it could have been a lot better. It's just like really like give yourself the time to be good at something.
On the last podcast was Laura and Tessa. Laura was saying how she like kind of got some sort of satisfaction of the idea of working the day before for something. We're all maybe there's something there, like you're saying. There's something enjoyable when you do pull it off. I guess like she was saying, once you pull it off, you're like, I'm still a magician.
Still got it. Yeah. No, there is something really truly gratifying about that, and that's why I will never like completely write off procrastination as a bad thing. But yeah,
just don't indulge too much, right?
Yeah, I just wish I'd just taken my education more seriously, taken my life more seriously at the time.
Man, you're so fascinating. I really appreciate you joining the podcast. I hope for people listening that I touched on the right topics. I feel like with you, we could just keep going for a long time. There's so many things to dive into. As always, I got to re-listen to this to really try to get the takeaways, write down those names. Otherwise, looking forward to seeing you at Art Breakers.
Yeah, should be a fun time.
22nd, 23rd, right? Am I correct? Okay,
Yep.
Awesome. Well, Amory, thank you so much. And do you want to give shout out your websites? How do people find you?
Yeah, it's amoryabbott.com, AMORYABBOTT, and that's either an @ or at a .com.
That's right. Go look him up. It's a lot of amazing work. And like I said, if you want to find, if you want to feel mood in a painting, you got it. You're striking it so well. I'm gonna have to go message Tony after this and be like, dude, I'm gonna meet you. Get on a show.
Also, I run the Emily Carr illustration Instagram feed.
Oh, you do? Okay,
and
awesome.
if any of you are interested in just seeing like the amazing work that my students have and are continuing to put out, go check out Emily Carr illustration.
Lots of really good artists, as always. Yeah, make sure to check that out. What else should we throw out there? Oh yeah, so Laura Bifano, I think this is the week she's gonna have an art show opening. Yeah. And I was gonna say you probably can relate to some of her work.
I love her landscapes.
Completely different, but landscapes and mountains and epic, but in a different manner.
I met Laura at Icon Conference in Portland in 2014,
that's
and then just ran into her.
She's cool.
At a snag function here.
Awesome.
Right after I moved here, and I was like, "What? Wait, you? Hey, wait a minute!"
That's so cool.
Awesome. Good community.
Having your work beside hers would be so fascinating. The juxtaposition. Oh, just it's.
We got to have a group show.
100%.
Okay.
Just seeing the subject matter and then just execution, just so different.
Mm-hmm.
That would be really cool. Okay.
I have one of her pieces up in my living room. I love her work.
I'm gonna get one this week for sure. All right, so get on there. Kafka's Main and Broadway, Thursday, September 13th.
Mm-hmm.
If I got it correctly, make sure that you show up because Laura's amazing. Her work is incredible. I just can't wait. So make sure to check that out.
And she'll have a booth at Art Breakers too.
Yes, Art Breakers. So many things, exciting things happening. Maybe we are building an art scene. All right, so just for Emery here, I'm not going to go too deep into metal, but this is instrumental. I'm pretty sure it's progressive metal. It's Pliny. I really hope I don't get kicked out of YouTube for this when I throw it up there. The song is called Salt and Charcoal. It's just so freaking beautiful. This is good. It's recent. Otherwise, if you want to learn more about Creative Theory Podcast, find me on Instagram and Facebook. Let's do it. Love you, people. Bye.
Peace.